Murtaza, are we ready to go?
Yes, we are live. Just let me check for once from
Mm-hmm.
my YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, looks like so.
Yes, we're live on YouTube. You can start.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to yet another session on our webinar series, which is called Navigating Careers in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And today we have a very special guest who also is my very good friend, Ivan Kukuljan, and he is from Slovenia. And I know Ivan since a couple of years now. I met him first in a conference in Spain, and it was right in the first meeting that we became friends. We had a common connection, of course. We both were pursuing physics. Ivan was there to give a presentation, and I was there just as a master student listening to him. And apart from giving a presentation about science, Ivan was also giving us political lessons. Which is always interesting. And after talks, Ivan has a very interesting background. Currently, he's working as a postdoc researcher at Institute of Artificial Intelligence for Health in Munich, in Helmholtz Center. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And he has done before this a postdoc at Max Planck Harvard Research Center for Quantum Optics. And of course, he has his PhD in theoretical physics, where he did quantum field theories. That's from Ljubljana, Slovenia. And today he's here to talk about AI for medicine. So as I mentioned, his current research is he's working as an AI researcher in the field of medicine. Last year, as far as I was updated, he was working on cancer detection. And today we are going to listen to Ivan about maybe a broader perspective on how artificial intelligence is impacting medicine in general, and maybe a little bit deeper dive in what he's doing as a researcher. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat, and we will stop Ivan once in a while so that he can answer these questions. But I just want to mention that apart from being a researcher and a good friend, Ivan is also a sailor. So he is also the captain of our ship. Last year we were sailing in Croatia for a week, and he taught us how to sail. He has been raised in a coastal region and is quite comfortable in sailing a boat or a ship in a stormy weather. So as you might have seen, it's common in physicists always. They, apart from doing physics, they are always doing some other stuff. And one thing, apart from playing guitar and being interested in politics, which I found really interesting in Ivan, is that he is quite a good sailor. And he taught me a little bit of sailing last summer. So over to Ivan. We are really excited to hear to you in this session, and hopefully we will have a lot of interesting questions.
Thanks, Junaid, or Amir. I don't know what you prefer to be called for this even too fancy introduction for for a humble postdoc like me. Thanks. Let me try to share the screen so that I can show the slides that I have for today. Perfect. Cool. So as Junaid, oh wait, let's see if this goes into the presentation mode. Just a sec. Ah, it did. Okay. Can everybody see the slides now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Good. Cool. So as Junaid already announced, we're going to be talking about AI in medicine today. And I'm going to try to give a little bit of the overview. But the field is also getting so big and so huge and so fastly developing that it's impossible to give a complete overview. So we'll look into some of the topics that I personally find interesting. And then we're also going to look into a few topics that our group, that my group at Helmholtz does, where, you know, I'm a bit more of an expert of. So a pleasure to meet you all. A pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to people from Kashmir. I've heard really lovely stuff about Kashmir, and I also know that it's one of the most beautiful regions in the world. So I also promised Junaid that someday I will visit him when he's there, and we'll go around. So I can't wait for this moment to come. And Junaid already introduced me, you know, extensively, so I will skip this and go directly to the topic. Also, you know, please feel free to interrupt at many points. I think it's always much nicer if it's, you know, a lively discussion rather than just, you know, one person talking and, you know, a long monologue. So if there's a question or, you know, if there's a remark, you people know a lot about AI already because I hear from Junaid that you have had a really great seminar and many of you are programming already. So you also know a lot, and you'll probably also have nice comments. So as I mentioned, AI in medicine is growing very rapidly, and as medicine is a very huge field, also the AI in medicine is becoming a huge field, and it's basically being applied to almost any little detail there is in medicine. So we're trying to do AI for everything possible within it. And some of the fields are already very advanced. So in some of the areas, as you will see, AI is already used a lot in the hospitals and, you know, in the daily clinical practice. And in some of the areas, we're still very early on, and there's a lot of work still to be done before things are actually used to help patients. But, you know, that's going to happen very fast. I think like even the situation today or 6 months later is already going to be very different. And, you know, even 2 years later, the situation is going to be very different from today. So it's really interesting to be in such a dynamical field. So what does AI do in medicine? There's many topics. A very big and important topic is drug discovery. So people are trying to use AI to discover new drugs. And that's, of course, a big interest also of the pharmaceutical companies, who are the big players that have a lot of money and they are investing into these things. But it's not just to make the pharmaceutical companies rich, it's also to help people. For example, people were able to find new antibiotics using AI, which I find really great. There are topics like radiology. We're going to talk more about it later. There is topics about clinics organization, how to, you know, manage a clinic. Probably everybody has been to a clinic at some point of your lives, and you know how complex this system is, how many details they have to pay attention to. And you can use AI to optimize this. You can use AI for patient tracking so that you monitor all the diagnostic tests that are done on a patient, all the signals that are coming from different machines and so on, and then trying to optimize the care that the patient gets and try to predict if there is going to be some complication like sepsis and so on early on, so that the patient doesn't have to suffer through it. And then there are specialized fields like pathology, neurology, hematology, surgery, and so on. And I'll be talking about some of those just in a few minutes. And the picture that I'm showing here on the right is from one of the recent papers where they're talking about foundation models. I'm pretty sure you've discussed foundation models before in this seminar. And there's this idea this discussion of what a good foundation model in medicine should be able to do, right? And they say a lot of things, right? The foundation model should be able to understand the images and all the diagnostic results, should be able to know the medical literature, should be able to read the medical reports, to understand, you know, if the doctor says something out loud, and so on, should be able to understand different parts of the human body, different organs. There's a big requirement. Let's see, you know, how far we get as a scientific community. So now I'm planning to talk about few of these fields a tiny bit more into detail, and I'm choosing just basically according to what I find interesting personally. I might be skipping some of the fields that are important. So please apologize me for that. But as I mentioned, the whole thing is too huge to cover in one single talk. Right, so let's talk then about drug discovery first. So the way drugs work is that there has to be some receptor that a drug acts upon. That can be either a specific protein on a cell surface or some pathway which helps to bring the drug into a cell. That's the first crucial point in the in the discovery, development of a new drug, is to find a suitable receptor. However, once we know the receptor, it is not at all straightforward to find the right drug that would be able to interact with that receptor. And the way people were doing this before AI was basically that having, deep and profound chemistry knowledge and pharmacy knowledge, they were able to have some intuition on how the new molecule should look like, but still they gave space to many thousands different molecules. So what they had to do is they had to synthesize these molecules one by one in the lab, do experiments, try to see if they can rule out certain types of molecules and so on. So it was a very long and tedious process, and it required a lot of highly trained specialists to do that. And what AI is trying to do now is to replace this super laborious process with a computer algorithm. So the computer algorithm can kind of, by being trained on many different drugs and by having really sophisticated AI architectures, is able to directly spit out molecules that could be suitable to interact with certain targets. And for example, here on the right, I'm showing a molecule that fits into a protein pocket. So the proteins they're usually like bound together in small bumps, and then they have pockets on the surface, and we're trying to design a molecule that can fit into such a pocket and then interact with the protein. And people do this very nicely with AI. Here is for example, a picture of one of these algorithms that was done in Yale in the USA, where the algorithm is not only able to design the structure of the molecule, but is also able to kind of design the molecule in such a way that it would have certain characteristics, like that it's not too toxic for other parts of the human body, that it's easy to synthesize, and so on. So they came up with these nice algorithms. And the interesting thing is that there's already a few drugs that were discovered using AI, and they already got their certificates to be used in practice. So I find this really nice, and I think in the future there will be more and more examples like this. And some nice examples already include new antibiotics. You know that it's like extremely difficult to find a new antibiotic, and then it's also super important because we're getting more and more antibiotic resistant bacteria. And if people are talking about some of the biggest threats to the civilization, like nuclear power and ecological devastation and so on, antibiotic resistant bacteria are also one of the big threats. And so if people can use AI to tackle this problem, I think it's a really great contribution. All right. Drug discovery is something that fascinates me, but it's not directly my field. So in case you would like to hear more about it, I think it's also the best thing is to invite somebody who's actually doing this, and then they can tell you a lot. And yeah, I think it's a super great field. Then the next one that I wanted to mention is one where the AI is already the most developed in medicine. And that's radiology. So radiology is anything that has to do with ultrasound, X-ray, CAT scans, MRI imaging, and so on. And you can imagine, this is needed for many different situations in the human. Either, somebody breaks a bone and that they need to understand where the fracture is and how complicated it is, or a person is suspected to have a tumor, and then there do the scans to understand, if that's true or not, or they want to do a scan to understand whether the heart is working properly, what the problem is, whether the brain is working properly. So there's many different situations, and AI is already very good at that. In particular, it's able to understand parts of the human anatomy very well. It's able to understand whether the parts look okay or there is some damage. What AI is also very good at is being able to understand 3D images, because as humans, we are good at understanding 2D images, but if the image is 3D, it becomes very hard to read. And the way doctors do this is going through different sections of the image, but that's like very tedious and slow, and also not often very accurate. And AI is really good at that. So people often ask me, should doctors be afraid of losing their jobs? And the answer is no. We are still gonna need doctors, and we don't have enough doctors anywhere in the world. There's a lack of doctors. Even in rich countries like Germany, there's not enough doctors. But the radiologists might be a tiny little bit afraid, because in this case, the AI is really doing such a great job that it's going to be used more and more in the future. And speaking of this question, is AI going to replace doctors? No, the answer is a clear no. There will always be a doctor in the process, most likely. And also, there's the question of who is responsible in the end for the diagnostics and for the treatment that the patient gets. And I think there should always be a human behind. But what AI is going to do is to help the doctor do their job faster, more accurate, more precise. Doctors are humans like we all are, and they're sometimes tired, or sometimes they have to work all night in the hospital, so they get exhausted, and maybe in the morning they're a bit less precise than they were in the evening. While the computer never gets tired and always offers the same precision. There was a question, I see.
Yeah, Ivan, thanks for explaining nicely so far. I have a question regarding, so you are saying that AI will not replace doctors. So, but I think AI will do, as far as I understood, AI will do a lot of stuff which doctors are doing already. So can we say that for those doctors who do not upgrade themselves or do not learn how to use AI or integrate it in their work, they are probably going to be in danger?
Yes, I think so. And indeed, what we see in Germany or at our institute is that there are actually many medical doctors who come and say, hey, I want to do an internship at your institute because I want to understand how AI works. I will go back to the clinic later. I don't want to be an AI developer, but I want to understand how it works. I want to be able to use it well, to be able to interpret the results that come out of AI. So that's really great to see that the young generation of doctors is interested and is following the development. I think this is going to happen eventually. However, it might not happen as quickly as we would expect, just because these systems are very slow to adopt
Yeah.
typically. And
And you said in Germany, like in your institute, doctors are already coming, or the people who are going to be doctors to learn AI. But for example, in our part of the world, this is not even, talked about. Yeah, there is some information about artificial intelligence is coming and it might replace doctors or whatever, but practically nobody gets training. No doctor, there is nothing available for a doctor so that he can go and train himself, he or she can go and train himself and get to know about AI and how they can integrate it. So yeah, I think it's really important to be on the same page as the technology as it improves. But as you said, it might take more time than expected.
Yeah, and I think that the potential of the AI is actually even bigger in countries that are not as rich as Germany, that can buy any fancy new equipment or that have lots of specialists available. So it might have an even bigger impact, in many other countries in the world, where then more patients can have the access to healthcare, because the AI can help the doctor, instead of, I don't know, checking 10 patients per day. With the help of AI, a doctor can maybe check 50 patients with the same reliability. And so more people can have the access to the doctor. Or instead of buying the most fancy MRI machine that's available out in the market, maybe with the help of AI, the doctor can use a slightly cheaper machine or some other diagnostic technique, but then use AI to improve the resolution and still get reliable results. I think that will be very, very helpful for, in many countries that cannot afford to buy the most expensive medical stuff that is out in the market.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very important point. And yeah, but that requires us to start learning AI as soon as possible.
Yes, but keep in mind that in medicine, AI is just one of the parts of the big puzzle, right? So
Yeah.
AI alone, I mean, we will talk about it maybe a bit later. Well, actually not, well, I haven't prepared it in the slides, but we can also discuss it. What are the new technologies coming out in medicine? It's not just AI. They're like really impressive new things that are coming out, really, really impressive. And many of those are also based on many other technologies which have nothing to do with AI. But of course, the great thing is if you can combine this together, right? AI with some modern development in chemistry or in biology, then you can make it really powerful. So I think AI alone is going to change a lot and it's going to help a lot. But if you combine it with other technological developments, then it can really be impressive.
Yeah, great. Interesting. Yeah, looking forward to know. Ivan, just want to make one request. Can you minimize your participant bar because it's
yes.
blocking some of
Oh,
the.
okay. I'm sorry. I was not aware that you could
Yeah,
leave.
we're able to see it.
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was hidden. Is it better now?
Yes, we can still see the bar. So maybe you
Yeah.
can push it a little bit up or down.
Can I move? I can move it actually. All
Yeah,
right.
you can move it.
Perfect.
Yeah, now
Good.
it's better.
Sorry for that. I thought Zoom was smart enough not to include those.
Apparently not. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna still keep you open here so that I see if you raise your hand. But I think the best thing to do is just to start talking, even to interrupt
Yeah, I
you.
will be interrupting you if there are questions.
Cool, perfect. Thanks a lot. And everybody else also, please feel free to interrupt. Huh? Don't be shy. I actually prefer to be interrupted because it's more interactive. It's like we're having a conversation rather than just a monologue. Cool. So right, so radiology. So we said that's already far ahead. But the other fields of AI that I will be talking now are still, still in the development. So one of the fields that I find interesting is AI in surgery, which people are trying to introduce. Like for example, the image here is showing a surgeon that is wearing these special glasses that project to him or to her the diagnostic images that the surgeon might need during the operation. So the surgeon is, cutting a certain part of the tissue, and then the correct image is presented, which is showing, I don't know, an X-ray or something else, so that the surgeon can understand, better which part of the tissue they have to cut and which not. Or people are developing algorithms that are monitoring the surgery procedure and are aware if something is going wrong, so that they can start an alarm that maybe a surgeon is doing an error, or are able to help provide the right tool that the doctor will need in a certain moment at this point, so that everything runs more smoothly. So nice stuff. Also, people are using this kind of glasses to help educate surgeons in developing countries. So for example, if the surgeons don't have the access to some really modern surgery technique that was developed, they can still use this kind of glasses to virtually take part in operations that are conducted, somewhere in some of the developed countries, and learn how to do some modern surgery, which I find really cool. Right, so that's surgery. There's a group also here in Germany, in Munich, that is developing this kind of AI. Nasir Nawab is the professor. Maybe if some of you are interested, you can also contact him. He's from Iran. Right, and now I'm coming to two fields that are done a lot in our group, and I know more about. So the first one is going to be pathology. Pathology is something that, before, when I was still a physicist, before I switched to this field, I didn't even know it existed. And now kind of I end up knowing a lot about, but it turns out that it's a super important field of medicine. So what is it? So let's say, that you have something on your skin and you're not completely sure what is it, right? Is it something dangerous or just, something that you shouldn't care about it too much? What what they do is a doctor might look at it, with a camera or with a magnifying glass, but sometimes they cannot just tell it from the way the skin looks, but they have to take a small sample of your skin, and they will send this sample to a pathologist, and then the pathologist is gonna do this procedure that is shown here. So it's gonna prepare the skin in formaldehyde to fix it, and then cut the skin in very, very, very thin slices, such that only basically one layer of cells is there in one slice. And then they can look at it under the microscope, and they can see how the cells look in this piece of skin. And then by looking at the cells, they're specially trained specialists. They're able to know what kind of disease is there. And I chose an example which is a more soft example, but where pathology is used a lot is to diagnose cancer. So every time there is, a person has a tumor, they're going to do biopsy. So they're going to take a sample of the tissue and they're going to do pathology with it, which helps the doctors understand basically what kind of cancer it is, what kind of tumor, how we can treat it, how serious it is, all these things. So it's a super important diagnostic method for cancers. It is also used if a person dies and then they are trying to understand why the person died. They're typically going to take up to 10 or 20 different samples from the whole body, from different organs, to understand basically what went wrong, what could be the source of that. And that's how young pathologists are trained, by the way. At least in Germany, like for 2 years, they only have to work on dead people. It's a bit hardcore, but that's a part of their specialization. Okay, and of course, one of the problems around the world, there is not enough pathologists to process all the samples. So to look at one sample, if it's a simple thing, it can be a few minutes, but if it's a more complicated case, it can be also up to 2 hours for the doctor to decide. A friend of mine who is a pathologist was telling me that they had an example of a girl who had something in her arm, and he got the slide, and he had to decide basically if it's a very dangerous cancer and her arm should be cut off, or it's nothing serious or something that could be treated with drugs. So it was a super responsible decision that he had to do, and it took him several hours. Or they also sent the sample to another specialist to get a second opinion because they wanted to be sure. In the end, unfortunately, the arm had to be cut off. So you can imagine it's important decisions that are based on this. That's how these samples look under the microscope, right? So you can see the tissue, you can see individual cells in there. And to me, as a non-medical person, I mean, I wouldn't be able to say anything from this, right? If you ask me if some of them has a cancer, I don't know, right? But a pathologist will immediately know what's going on. And that has become, just because it's so important, has become a field also in AI. So people are trying to develop AI algorithms that can look into this kind of images and understand what is going on. And this, so there are already products in the market, but it's a very challenging field. And why is it challenging? Just because those slides are huge, right? It's showing here how many pixels are there, right? So that's several tens of millions of pixels. And to diagnose it correctly, you have to look into individual cells, but it's also not enough to look into individual cells. You also have to look into the bigger structure of the tissue. So it's a very multi-level problem, and that becomes also challenging to do for AI to understand all these different levels, from individual cells to how the bigger tissue looks like. And there has been, and that's basically a challenge. So many research groups, also many companies around the world, are trying to develop the algorithms that could do this best possible, and are getting also very good at it. And what I also found nice is that because these slides are so huge, you can if you just use the normal AI architectures like transformers, there's a limitation basically of how big of the slides you can input there. So people actually came up and developed new AI architectures that are specialized for this problem. Like this paper here that developed a transformer where you can input several millions of tokens in there. So they had to come up with special tricks to do that. So I find it also nice that these kind of problems are stimulating the basic AI development. And I said there's already examples in the market. There are several companies out there. I'm showing one here that was one of the first and was also the first one that got a certificate for their product. They're called Page AI, and they are in the USA. But they were German founders. And they got a certificate for the prostate cancer. So they have this program that can diagnose prostate cancer automatically from the images. But they are now trying to basically build a tool that would be able to understand all different possible cancers. And that's already basically bringing the discussion to what is really challenging in medical AI. So in medical AI, the most challenging thing is not how to do the best possible architecture that can solve something. The biggest challenge lies in the data, right? Is how to get the correct data to train your architectures. I will talk a bit more about this later, but I'm showing here a talk that was given by the CEO of this company. It was last Friday in Munich, and he is showing how much data they're using to train their new algorithms that would be able to diagnose any cancer. So this here shows how much data there is in the whole of Netflix, right? The internet movie provider platform. And this is how much data they're using now to train the cancer algorithm. So it's huge data. They're working with several thousands of hospitals around the world to collect all this data. They have to build, their special infrastructure, the data storage centers. They have a lot of GPUs. They have invested millions and millions into GPUs because you need to have the huge compute power to process that. So and I think with this kind of data, they're likely to actually solve the problem. So they're gonna do it. They're in that sense, they're lucky because they're in the USA and then they can get a lot of investment. But this doesn't mean that any medical thing has to be as complex as this one. There's other problems that are easier to solve that you don't need millions of investment, right? But here they're really aiming at understanding every possible cancer, right? So it's a huge problem they're trying to solve. Yes, Junaid, you had a question.
Yeah, the question is not from me. The question is from the live chat, and Imbisat, who is also part of CQAI, wants to ask, what measures are in place to validate and verify the accuracy of AI-driven pathology results? She's curious.
Yes, that's a very good question and a very expert question. So I'm personally not an expert in pathology, but people typically use many different measures, and there are different problems out there. So they look into specific cancers, and then they can see how well they can diagnose a specific cancer, and that there are standard data sets out there that serve as benchmarks. So people compare their algorithms on these benchmarks. So typically they look at a range of, 10, 15 different cancers, how well they do. Also for different cancers in different organs, there can be a different genetic mutation that is causing the cancer. And so there's like the measures if the AI can recognize a specific mutation from the images. These are called biomarkers. There are tasks like segmentation and so on that people compare their algorithms. So that's being quite strict. It's also people are trying to standardize this a little bit, this test tasks, because typically if a new paper comes, then they're going to say we are the best, but then they only show those results where they really are the best.
Yeah, exactly. This is a problem which I have personally also experienced in deep learning and machine learning in general, that people publish their best results and best example cases. And
Yes.
the studies are a little bit misleading sometimes. It's not thoroughly investigated.
Yes, it is. But luckily, there's competitions that people organize. So then you have like, a standardized data set, a standardized set of tests, and you can compare different methods. And of course, in medicine, one important thing is, let's say you develop a new algorithm, you can't just go on and sell it to hospitals, but you need to get a certificate that it's tested as a medical device, and that's a very strict procedure. So, the regulating bodies, every country have their own. If you want to sell in their market, you have to get the certificate from that regulating agency. It's gonna put you through a lot of stuff before you can get a certificate. That's one of the reasons why, let's say, AI startups need in medicine, need a slightly longer time to get into the market than other fields, is because you have to get the certificates. And this typically takes at least 2 years between you apply and before you get it. So it prolongs the time before you can start selling. But once you have it, then you're a bit protected from your competition, because they also cannot just jump in, but they have to go through the same process.
Yeah, exactly. We have one more question from Mohsin. I think it's a little bit specific question, but I will nevertheless ask it. It's, what is the accuracy of current AI models that are used to diagnose malignancies? I don't even know if this is a disease. What is this?
Malignancy is, you can use it for presence of cancer.
Okay.
And
he
I don't
wants to
know.
know what's the accuracy, if you have any idea about that.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know the numbers because I'm not myself in the pathology field. But we can check this also quickly if you want. I think for certain cancers they're pretty good, and for certain cancers they're still struggling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have one more follow-up question, and then you can continue. Can we just go ahead with AI models as of now, or we need people to second the opinion? I think this is just what you answered already, that you need also certificates, and there is more restriction regarding AI compared to other spheres of life when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah,
right?
and the way I understand the question is also, can we get rid of the doctor, right, and just use AI to diagnose it? I think this depends from a field to field. It relates very well to the previous question, right? What is the accuracy? So let's say certain skin cancers have a nearly 100% accuracy, right, for AI. Then you can say, okay, we have tested this on many independent sets, on many independent cases, and it has always been nearly 100%. Then it's safe to trust it, right? What people also show that sometimes with AI, they can achieve an accuracy which is more than human, right? Because humans are imperfect, and AI, if you train it with a huge data set, you can get very good results. So with this kind of things, and maybe something that is not so, so dangerous, right? I mean, skin cancer is something that, you maybe just cut a part of the skin out and it's okay. But let's say if there's a decision whether you want to cut somebody's arm out or not, I think there should always be a human in the loop, right? To make this kind of decisions, which are super responsible, right? So
I think Ifra has a question.
I basically have a question, rather I would say a confusion. So where does the center of attention of the AI basically lie? Is it like that we are trying to make the simulations faster? Let's speak, as you mentioned that, we are doing the biopsies and other things where the disease is diagnosed kind of, or it is just that we try to replace the whole biopsy thing because we know that it has very adverse effects on a patient once it is done, and some patients don't even survive. They're not able to cope up with the biopsy thing, which takes place, which is the first step in the this scheme of treatment, I would say. So where do you see that the main focus of AI lies, and where do you personally think the attention should drift?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think AI alone will not be able to replace biopsy, simply because you do need to get the biological material out, right, to be able to see what's happening in there. There are other techniques which are more diagnostic techniques, more, let's say, biomedical techniques like liquid biopsy, that are trying to replace biopsy. So the idea is, for people that are not familiar with the vocabulary, if you do a biopsy, you have to actually make, a hole into the human body, go in with an instrument and take out a part of the tissue. And that's, of course, invasive for the patient. You actually have to cut, through the tissue. What they're trying to develop now is the so-called liquid biopsy, where you could collect so the idea is, there are fluids that flow naturally in the human body, like blood, or plasma, or cerebral fluid, and so on, that maybe come in a close contact with some organ. And by passing by the organ, they collect some, material from the organ. And then if you have a precise enough diagnostic technique, you can just take blood and analyze this material within blood. That's the idea of liquid biopsy, so that you don't actually have to cut into the kidney, but you could just analyze it in the blood. That's called liquid biopsy. It was invented not so long ago, a few years ago, but it's still now being researched, and still it is only certified for a very small number of cancers. You need to basically, for every single cancer, you have to prove that it works. You have to develop the methodology how to do it. So this is in place, and it's already used in many clinics, but only for a small number of cancers. The idea is that, of course, one day we would be able to do it for every possible cancer, but it's not as easy. It just depends how much of the material the cancer can leave into the blood. That's like what people are looking is cell-free DNA. So that's the DNA that is not in any cell, but it's floating freely in the blood. The problem with there is that these signals are very noisy. There's a lot of other stuff that is flowing in the blood, so you have to have very precise instrumentation to be able to detect these kind of things. So yeah, there's definitely, that's a big focus of the research. However, we are not quite there yet, and I don't see it coming in the very near future. So I think for quite a while we will unfortunately still have to take tissues from patients by biopsy.
I would like just to add one point, speaking about the liquid biopsies and the other things that you mentioned. So my question is that, for example, you mentioned that AI is trying to build the new algorithms. Do you really think that there is a need of building a new algorithm when we already have few ones? Speaking about Shor's algorithm, so don't you think that maybe I'm not quite aware about the field as of now, that we need to invest in the field of the quantum computing parallelly in equal proportions as we do in the field of AI, instead of building the new algorithms? Because as I mentioned, that instead of trying to make the simulations faster, which takes sometimes maybe 2 years or 3 years of time, which is going to reduce the process by some weeks or maybe a day, the process is going to happen in a day. But then again, we have to do the, as you mentioned, liquid biopsies. According to my previous knowledge, when I have spoken to some doctors, the liquid biopsies is not considered so much authentic compared to the incision biopsy that we do with the patients. So if there is already some underconfidence in the field, so what is the contribution of AI? Where actually is it contributing to the field of the medicines to take it to the next level?
Right, that's a good question, and a very broad one. Is touching 3 huge fields, like including quantum computing, which is another series of lectures. I mean, luckily, I do come from that background of quantum physics. So I can confirm to you that there is a lot of investment into quantum computing, and there's a lot of efforts to make it work. However, there's also huge challenges, right? So even if I give you, a working quantum computer with many qubits, there are not yet quantum algorithms out there that you could use it for many different problems, right? You mentioned the Shor algorithms, which is for the prime number factorization, and that's one of a very few quantum algorithms that have been proven to work. So let's just use another example, right? Quantum chemistry, right? So people propose to use quantum algorithms for quantum chemistry, and then you can do the calculation of how many qubits you would need to do better than the current methods that chemists use in their simulation, which are still, classical methods. And it turns out that you would need an extreme number of qubits, just because even those methods that chemists use are approximations. They are so accurate that they get so many digits right that, to do better than that, you would need an enormous quantum computer. And then the question is, problems in medicine, that's a big topic. Like, would a quantum computer help? Typically, these problems are not so computationally heavy. They are more, the problem there is more that they're very complex, in the sense that the data is noisy, that there's so many biological processes that are affecting something in a human body, and that you cannot possibly include them all into your simulation. So just having a bigger compute power. I mean, of course, you need many GPUs to process your, when you're training your AI. But to be honest, if you ask me, like, would it help if you had a quantum computer right now? I would say not immediately. There would have to be a lot of work done to develop the algorithms that could actually help in medicine, even if you had a crazy big quantum computer.
Thank you, Yvonne. Last but not least, I would say rather this is a general knowledge question. I think in the first half of the meeting, you mentioned about sepsis. So has AI contributed anything in the field of cancer? I would say typically in the field of malignancy. Have we reached anywhere in the field of targeted drug therapies that we are able to localize the infection, kind of we are in a position to treat sepsis, or we are just looking forward maybe in a 10 years of time or 20 years of time we are able to do that, because that's where we see these days doctors drop their weapons?
Yes, the answer is yeah, AI has done a lot. So for example, typically it's very hard to predict if a patient is going to have a sepsis when they're lying in the hospitals, and there are algorithms that get the signals from all the monitoring device that the patient is attacked on, and give an early warning if the patient is going to have a sepsis. So that's something that is great, and it's already saving lives in certain hospitals. And in terms of cancer, yes, there's definitely an improvement. So just look into this image, right? It's huge, and if I show you, a zoom in, it looks like that, right? Of that image. See how many cells there are, right? And now imagine that you're a doctor that has to take a microscope and then zoom in into all these parts of the image and try to spot malignancies in there. If you're a very well-trained doctor, you will spot some obvious one fast, but then there could be a malignancy in just one or two different cells. And you simply don't have the time to look into every of 1,000 cells or 5,000 cells that are in there, right? It's not feasible, like, of course, in a wonderful world where doctors would have infinite time, it would work. And the AI is able to do that, and it's able to do that fast. So, and also be more reliable. I was also talking with a doctor recently, a dermatologist, and they say that they cut too many things from patients from the skin because of the false positive results, and that AI is helping to reduce the false positive number because it's able to really understand whether something on the skin is cancer or not. So instead of so now people don't have to get cut just for nothing, right? So yeah, there's definitely a big impact there. Also, in terms of speed, in terms of doctor availability, there's simply not enough pathologists out there, and that hinders the diagnostic process because people have to wait a long time before they can get diagnosed. So yeah, there's a big impact already in medicine coming from AI.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you.
There's one more question I see, or not?
It's just a comment. I think you can go on.
I can go on. Cool. All right, so that's pathology, and now we come to my actual field of work, which is hematology, which is also about cancer, but is about specific set of cancers, which are blood cancers. And I don't know, like, you're probably here from different backgrounds, so some of you might know a lot about biology and some of you a bit less. So I'm still going to do the introduction, and I apologize to those that know it already. So basically, how our blood is produced is it's produced in the bones, and inside of the bone there's the so-called bone marrow, which is a liquid mixture of different cells, and importantly, many of these cells are the so-called bone marrow stem cells. And the stem cells are basically the cells that, like the one here on the top, that have the ability to later evolve into any blood cell that we have in the blood. This process is called differentiation. So the evolution from a stem cell to mature blood cells, and this is how basically blood is produced in the human body. These stem cells divide. Typically, from a division, you get two cells. One of them remains a stem cell so that we preserve the number of stem cells, and the other one starts the process of differentiation. This differentiation doesn't happen immediately, but goes through many steps. And this is called hematopoiesis, so the blood production. And that's how it looks if it's normal, if everything is going okay. However, sometimes it happens that during these divisions of stem cells, there is an error in the transcription of the DNA, which we call a mutation. And then if this mutation is bad enough, what the consequence of this is that the stem cell just goes crazy. So instead of differentiating to mature blood cells, it stops in one of the early phases. So one of these early stages, and instead of differentiating further, it just starts to divide like crazy, and that you call the leukemia. So what typically happens is that the person doesn't have enough of certain blood cells, and then typically the immune system starts to fail, and the people are going to experience anemia. They're going to start to feel weak, sick, and so on. And some leukemias can be really fastly evolving, and for some leukemias, people can die within a few weeks if it's not diagnosed. For some leukemias, it's months. And so, yeah, it's a pretty bad disease. All in all, leukemias constitute around 6% of all the cancers around the world. All right, so that's basically the field where I'm working, and we're trying to develop methods to diagnose it. So how does leukemia diagnosis work? And that makes it interesting actually for AI. It's a very complex process. It's not just looking into one single thing, but it's looking into many different things, many different probes that they need to do into a patient, and then taking all of these results together and deciding. What they look into, they typically start with looking into a blood. So they take a sample of blood, they spread it on a piece of glass and look at it under the microscope to see if there's some early signs of leukemia. But after that, because the leukemia, I said, was a disease happening in the bone marrow, they also need to do a bone marrow puncture, bone marrow aspiration, which is a very painful process for the patient. And then they also look at this under the microscope. And then they do several other techniques. So you might be familiar probably with genetic sequencing. That is becoming more and more important today in hematological diagnostics. But then there's other techniques like flow cytometry, which is hugely important. It's maybe not so familiar to people outside of medicine or biology. So basically what they do is they attach to the cells different markers. So these are special molecules that connect to certain proteins on the cell surface, and they have a fluorescent molecule attached to this. So if you shine a laser, each of these markers is going to shine with a different color, and then you bring the cells one by one through the laser, so you're able to understand how many cells have what type of proteins on their surfaces, and this gives you a very good idea of what is happening inside the bone marrow, because you know how these results have to look for a healthy person, but you also know how they look for different leukemias. And then people also look into the chromosomes under the microscope and try to understand if there's an aberration. So for example, here you see the chromosome 11 is missing a small part here, and this part of the chromosome 11 got attached to the chromosome 1 instead. Now, actually, I think there was a translocation with the chromosome 9 in this case, and this can lead to leukemia. Typically, for each one of these processes, you need a specially trained specialist. So there's typically 3 or 4 people that are involved into a diagnosis of a single person. And what we are trying to do is to develop AI algorithms that can look into all these different data, and where one AI model would be able to understand it all. Where we started, I mean, people in my lab before even I joined was here in this stage with the blood smear, just because this is the beginning of every diagnosis, and this kind of guides the rest of the diagnostics. So depending on what they see here, they know what particular procedures they have to do here, what particular procedures they have to do there and there. So this kind of guides the whole diagnostics, and that's why we started. Also because we are lucky to work with a lab that provided us a lot of data. So we have some of the best data sets around the world on blood smears, and we can use them to train our algorithms. And where people started with was a simple task of determining the cell type with AI. And that was done already several years ago, and it's nearly perfect. I think it has like 99% of precision. And that's already also used in the lab that we are working with. So they use it in practice already, and it speeds up their work quite a bit, because the tedious work that a human would have to do, look into every different cell and determine which cell type it is now done automatically, and it saves them a lot of their precious time. The algorithm also is able to pinpoint, which parts of the cell it was looking in to make the decision, so the doctor can also verify that this is being done correctly. But of course, we don't want to stop by just determining the cell types. And the question is, can we diagnose which type of leukemia it is from blood smears? And that was the focus of quite a few projects in the last years. And so how does it work? Basically, for every patient, we get 500 images of white blood cells. They look like this here. And then the AI algorithm has to look into these 500 images and decide whether the patient is healthy or not. And if the patient is not healthy, which type of leukemia it is. And now I'm going to do something which I think is very important. And instead of discussing much how this is done with AI architectures, I'm going to discuss actually what is the most important thing for medical AI, and that's dealing with the data, right? And I'm going to try to give you an idea, what is the difficulty that you are facing when you're trying to do AI for medicine. And the biggest time spent is actually curating the data and cleaning the data, and the architecture itself and training the algorithm is just the small part in the end. And the quality of your results will depend a lot on how you clean the data. And sometimes this is even more important than using the most sophisticated architecture that's out there. So what are the challenges? Well, the first challenge in medical AI is the data privacy, right? So medical data, of course, it's sensitive. When we are in the situation that we are patients, right? We wouldn't like that just anyone could answer our medical data. It's private. It's intimate. Sometimes we would feel I don't know, uneasy if just anyone could look into it, and that's then also rightly protected by the legislation in every country. So for us researchers, this means that the medical data is not so easily available, and in particular that if you're trying to train an AI algorithm, you cannot get as much data as they have to train ChatGPT, where they can just scrape the internet and get all possible data that's out in the internet. Typically, the data sets that we're using in medical AI are much smaller than what is used in some other AI tasks around there. So you have to pay then special attention to the quality of the data, to cleaning of the data, and so on. Already to get the data, you have to get ethical committee approvals. Every hospital has an ethical committee that decides for which research project they're willing to share their data and not. And so that's a process. So that's one issue. Now, the other issue is the complexity of the data. I'm showing here, basically, this is for leukemia diagnostics. I'm showing how many different types of leukemias are out there, right? So every box is not just one leukemia type, but it's like one group of leukemia types, right? So in each of these boxes, there can be another 3 or 4 or sometimes 10 types of leukemia. So the process of so this process is very complex, right? There are many different cases. The size of the boxes here are showing, for example, in the data set that we have, which is like a real world data set from the clinic, how many patients we have for different leukemia types. And then you can see that for some leukemia types, there's a lot of data. For some leukemia types, there's very few patients that have it. So when you train your algorithm, you're going to be doing quite well on these types, but it's going to be very hard to train a good algorithm for some special cases where you only have like 1 or 2 patients in the data set, right? And even for a human that is trying to diagnose it, this kind of patient, sometimes mean a big challenge because the people actually have to look the scientific literature to make sure that what they're diagnosing is correct. Sometimes they even have a big discussion in the team, look, there's this particular patient, it has very special characteristics. What do you think of this? I think it's this, but can you double check what I'm saying? So that represents a challenge when you're doing medical AI. And also, when you look into the medical data sets, they're super noisy. There's missing data. They don't do all the diagnostics for every patient. There's errors in the data. There is, sometimes there's bad quality of some images. Sometimes there are bad quality of some other diagnostic result that they do. So it requires quite a lot of filtering of this. To do this correctly, you need to have a medical person involved because, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not, I'm not able to judge these results just, from top of my head. So that's a big process. Okay, that's just to give you an idea. You of course, any task is solvable, and you can go and clean your data. And what I'm showing here is a little bit of some stuff that we have been doing. So we are now using transformer architectures that you might be familiar with to tackle this problem. And then you can use it to diagnose from peripheral blood. And what I'm showing here is the confusion matrix. I believe you're familiar with confusion matrices, right? So basically, what I show on the left is the true diagnosis for a patient, and what I show on the right is what the model predicted. And you can see that the accuracies are not very great, right? The best is for healthy people, which are recognized with 85% of precision. And then for things like acute leukemia or MPN, myeloid proliferative neoplasms, where there's still a reasonable accuracy, but then many other diseases, the accuracy is quite low. And why is it low? Because also the human would not diagnose it from blood, just because, as I mentioned, the blood is produced in the bone marrow, and some leukemias you can only be diagnosed from the bone marrow itself because the information is not there in the blood. So there's a limit to how much you can extract from the blood. Also, some of leukemias you cannot just diagnose from looking into the cells under the microscope, but you actually have to do the DNA sequencing or the flow cytometry because only this will reveal the true information. And we were a bit optimistic because we were thinking, okay, maybe AI is able to extract from images more than a human does. It does slightly better. So, for example, cases like MDS, where you get a precision of 56%, where the current doctrine of the World Health Organization is that the MDS cannot be diagnosed from blood. So you can see that AI is still able to get some little bit of information out more, but still, 56% is not something that you would use actually in the real world, right? So the message from here is that to tackle hematological diagnostics is really not enough to look into just blood, but you need to look into all of these different types of data that they also use in reality. And that's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to develop an algorithm which would be able to look into all of these different types of data and understand it, right? And be able to combine it meaningfully. And that's a huge task. So that's, it's an incredible task. We have a very smart PhD student, luckily, that is challenging this, tackling this challenge. And just wanted to show, this is the kind of output that the algorithm produces for the doctor. So they show them, which type of leukemia it is most likely and what the probabilities are. It also shows them which blood cells were the most important one for the diagnostics, and also what parts of the cells the algorithm was looking into, so that the doctor can quickly verify that what the AI is doing makes sense in this case. And what we have also done is basically we have checked which cells the AI is looking into, and then ask the doctor also for every patient to tell which cells the doctor thinks are the most important ones. And we have been able to show that this basically matches, so that both AI and the doctors find out the right I mean, the same set of cells. So the AI is kind of able to understand which cells are the malignant ones when doing the diagnosis. So yeah, as I mentioned, we are trying to now expand to multimodality, and multimodality, as you might know, is also a big challenge in AI in general, right? So we have pretty good algorithms for images, we have pretty good algorithms for text, we have reasonably good algorithms for tabular data, but the challenge now is how to combine in one single architecture all of them, and the challenge is reasonable, right? So while the transformers are good for text and they're doing very well also for images, they're not so great for tabular data yet. So they're not so good for genetic sequences yet. So there's a big challenge of how to come up with an architecture that can at the same time understand images and genetic sequences in the same architecture. So those are then become also interesting machine learning questions, and that people are trying to solve in the field. And another big topic that is a very hot topic around the world right now is, of course, foundation models. I mean, ChatGPT was the game changer, and it has become also a big thing in medicine. So now people are trying to develop medical foundation models. A foundation model, as everything in AI, is not very precisely defined, but the way I understand it is a huge model that can consume a lot of data, and that is most importantly being able to solve many different tasks, right? So that it's not trained for one specific task, but can do many different tasks at the same time. And now we have a big discussion, whether in medicine the foundation models are the way to go, or it's better to focus on specific models that are trained for one specific task and do it very well. And I think the specific models are still winning as of 2024 for the moment, but foundation models are getting better and better. And so it's not necessarily true that in half a year or maybe next year that the foundation models are, I think it's very likely that they are going to overtake. There's going to be a bit of a legal problem of how to register, right? Because in medicine, you need to register every single device for every specific task, right? You cannot come and say, I have a foundation model, I want to register it for everything, right? But you can come, I want to register this model for this particular cancer type. So these models are still going to have to pass through all the tests one by one, which is correct, because of course, if we are patients and we come to the clinic and a doctor says, I have this magical thing, that can do it all, you are like, I would actually prefer, an expert for my particular problem, right? Rather than something that can do everything, but, you're not completely sure if it can do it well. But anyway, one other important thing why foundation models are good in medicine, and that's like one big problem that we are facing when doing AI for medicine, is the so-called domain problems. Namely, if I have data from one lab, I can come up with an algorithm that is nearly perfect for the data from this lab. But then you bring to me the samples from a different lab, and my algorithm is going to fail. And it fails for simple reasons. Sometimes just because the microscope that the lab is using has a slightly different color in the background. You see this one is a bit more orange, this one is white, right? And this to a human doesn't make a big difference, but to AI it does, and it fails. And there was a big research going on how to get rid of this problem, and people tried many, many different tricks. In the end, what works best is having a lot of data from many different labs. There is no other trick that can replace this. So if you're able to get a lot of data from many different labs and train your algorithm, then the algorithm is going to be robust. And the foundation models are getting there and achieving this. So yeah, that turns out to be the best way to go. The other tricks did improve the models by a little bit, but there's nothing better than having a lot of data. So remember before I was showing you this company that has more data than Netflix, they're probably going to be able to do really good stuff with it. So just showing that also in pathology, there has been several foundation models that came out in the recent few months, and there's more and more coming. And it's going to be interesting to see where the field evolves. We are also trying to do some stuff with foundation models in our group. So yeah, I think it's interesting times ahead. If somebody wants, we can make a bet which one wins, task-specific models or foundation models. in the end. So that's as much as I prepared. I think there's probably a few more questions, and I have a couple of minutes still of time, but then unfortunately I will have to run for other tasks of the day. But I think we still have a few minutes to chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan, for the wonderful presentation. I'm not sure if you actually left anything. You said in the beginning that there are a lot of fields which you will be not talking about.
Oh, I left out a lot. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe we bring you back at some other point. But I think this was a very nice overview and a lot of information, digestible information, very balanced, not so technical, but also, I think people who really don't do AI at the moment can understand it. We do have a couple of questions. One is from Munib. He asks, what skills should a general practitioner, which in German would be Hausarzt, develop to effectively integrate AI into their practice? And how can professional development ensure these skills are maintained? I think it's a general question, but maybe you can comment on it.
It's a very important one. So I think with AI, one very important thing to know is being able to interpret results from the AI, being able to understand when you can trust them and when not. And this goes to this kind of discussion that, this kind of tables that I was showing, the accuracy of the models, right? And there were also questions from the audience about the accuracy. So that's always very important to look into, right? And every developer of the AI should list this kind of results. So
in other words, Ivan, are you saying that they need to get at least a little bit of information how AI works and what is, for example, accuracy, and what does it mean to have a certain number in accuracy?
Exactly, yes. And also be aware that, AI can hallucinate sometimes, meaning it can produce nonsense results, right? As if you ask ChatGPT, if you chat with it for a while, you're gonna get some ridiculous answers, right? So
yeah, exactly. I tried to create a reference. I asked it for references of a certain topic when it was out in the beginning, and it created own references. So because it's a generative model and it also hallucinates a bit, and that was quite funny actually.
Yes, it is. It's very funny. I mean, not every model that we use is generative, so the other ones are more robust. But I think a good point for the doctor is to kind of have an understanding of what are the limitations of the model, in what cases it can do well, right? So let's say, some type of skin disease the model is very good at, and then you can trust it. But maybe some other type of skin disease the model is not so good, and then it's important to know this and to know that, to interpret these results with a grain of salt, to kind of know that, okay, maybe for this kind of disease, maybe I still rely more on my medical knowledge as a doctor rather than blindly trusting AI. So I think this should be the kind of most important kind of set of skills by a doctor that wants to use it.
Yeah, definitely. If you have a couple of more minutes, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Which is more like I would say about your personal journey. So when I met you, you were a theoretical physicist, and I also attended your talk in Spain. It was also quite theoretic about quantum field theories. But later on, you decided to shift to AI. I know that you wanted to do something which is more applied and where you can maybe see results in the society. But could you maybe comment on that? Why did you shift to AI? And also, how difficult was this transition going from physics or mathematics to AI? Because we have a lot of people who are doing physics or mathematics, but they keep this unidimensional or unidirectional view of their career. They don't think of interdisciplinary careers.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like, if you like physics and you're enjoying it, and also if you're lucky enough that you have a position where you can do it, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's not that, everybody should switch to the AI. No, I mean, on the contrary. I mean, it's probably also a bit of a hype, and, like after a while, the hype is going to settle down and so on. I mean, we'll see, what comes out of it. But yeah, for me personally, I was being less and less satisfied by working on abstract problems that I didn't see a connection with the real world so much anymore. And I wanted to work on something that had the real world connection, that had some impact, that somebody could actually use to do something. So that was my personal motivation. And I found this field inspiring. Also, it's very quickly evolving. In medicine, there's some technologies that came out 2 years ago, not like physics where, the bigger changes were like 30, 40 years ago or even more. Here, like really new things are coming out every year, and gives you a lot of opportunities to work on something that nobody has worked before. So that was my motivation. Also, I'm hoping to, maybe have a startup at some point. So that's also one of the motivation. I was kind of a bit frustrated with the situation in academia and the precarious
We
jobs
all
that
are.
were.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was suffering from that. The transition, it's not done yet. I mean, there's so much of biology that I don't know, right? And I'm
Well, actually, I am quite impressed. Like you have learned so much biology now. I almost felt I'm listening to a doctor who has learned AI rather than someone who was doing physics and now has learned some biology.
right, but that's
So,
because you're not a biologist or a doctor, right? So
yeah.
if you were a biologist or a doctor, you would very quickly spot mistakes in what I say, right?
Yeah, but I think this is happening more and more, that the interdisciplinary careers are getting more and more common, and that's where people can shine in terms of career opportunities. And also, if you are a doctor, okay, you can be a very good doctor, or if you're a physicist. But if you're a physicist who learns how to code and who knows what AI is and still does physics, it earns more opportunities for you. So in
Yes,
that
and
in that
also
respect, what is there some advice for young audience who is here, who are confused about their careers
yeah,
and
also in this field is the nice thing about interdisciplinarity is that there is no one in the whole process that knows it everything. There are doctors that are specialists on the medical part, but they don't know so much about AI. There's AI developers that know more about AI but don't know so much about medicine. There's, mathematicians and physicists that know about mathematics a lot, and maybe missing out some parts. But the only way to do it is to solve it in a group of people working together, being able to talk to each other in such a way that everybody can contribute their part of the knowledge, and then you have the complete knowledge together. And I'm really enjoying this process much more than just talking to physicists. It's much more inspiring, and it's very satisfactory. So it's fine if you don't know everything, right? Which also makes more room for people that want to switch to it from different fields. There's not such a big pressure that you should know everything. And also, well, if you're coming from physics, the things are not going to be so difficult as theoretical physics is. So the things are
definitely.
easier. It's more that it's very broad, right? So there's a lot of things that you have to learn to have a complete picture, and that requires years and years, right? So even, I mean, you don't expect that you will know it immediately. No, I mean, like for quite a while you're going to be very lost, right? But then if you're a quick learner, and more importantly, if you know how to talk to people, if you know how to ask questions, if you know how to learn from there, that can speed up that process.
Yeah, I think the last part is, in my opinion, the most important part. You need to be able to communicate and, as you said, communicate to people from different backgrounds and know where your sweet spot is and start learning it from the people who have already learned it, rather than, starting rebuilding the wheel and in your own room. So I think it's much easier if you talk to people. For example, from this talk, I learned so much that if I would Google it or even ask ChatGPT, I think it would take me at least a few hours to get an idea
Well,
of what you
ChatGPT is
present.
impressive, nowadays. So
Yeah, but I would also need to know what do I need to ask it. Here you presented already to me what are the hot topics out there and the cutting edge. For example, you presented a picture from a talk which is from last week. I don't think ChatGPT would have that. So, but I agree, it's getting very. I have a pro subscription, so I can see like it's getting very good, and I use it a lot. Yeah. But yeah, thank you very much, Ivan, and it was amazing. I'm sure that everybody liked it, and hopefully you will come back soon at some point. And again, the invitation to have an offline session in Kashmir and visiting the mountains of Kashmir is always open.
that would be incredible. Yeah, that
We
would
all
be lovely. I mean,
would
that would be great if we can do this seminar live then.
Yes,
in
definitely. We
Kashmir?
are creating an academy in Kashmir. So we now have a small office there, and we are going to train people on ground offline. We have a team for that. And we are challenging the system that, we can do it on our own. We don't need to rely on something else. And I will definitely invite you there for a offline talk. You can come in summer, you can come in winter. I know you like skiing very much, so that's the winter option is there. But in summer also, Kashmir is very attractive if you
Yeah,
want
I
to do
think I'm gonna
trekking
come
and go on.
in the summer actually, because
Yeah.
I've seen the photos and it looks absolutely incredible. So thanks a lot, Junaid, for organizing this, for inviting me. I hope it was understandable to at least to a certain extent. I will unfortunately have to rush now because I'm already late for my next appointments today. So wish everybody a nice evening and hope to see you very soon.
Take care, Ivan. Bye bye. Have a
Ciao,
nice
ciao.
weekend. Ciao.